Welcome back to the Echoes of Ihsan Podcast. Today we're diving deep into the world of Islamic legal rulings and judgments. We'll be exploring the fascinating insights found in Sunan al Tirmidhi, Volume 3. You might be thinking, legal rulings. Well, it sounds a bit dry, right? But trust me, this is anything but. We're going to be talking about the practicalities of everyday life in a society guided by Islamic principles. Everything from resolving disputes and the ethics of buying and selling, to even, believe it or not, what to do if a mouse drowns in your cooking fat. Intrigued? I thought so. Let's get started. I'm joined today by our expert on this topic. They've dedicated countless hours to study these texts, and they're here to help us understand the wisdom and relevance of these rulings for us today. Let's jump right in with a hadith that really caught my eye. It's Hadith 1322, and it describes how the Prophet, peace be upon him, preferred to avoid judging altogether, despite the importance of justice. It's pretty surprising, isn't it? You'd think a prophet would embrace the opportunity to deliver divine judgments. What are your thoughts on this reluctance?
Well, what's fascinating here is that this hadith reveals the immense weight and responsibility that comes with the act of judging. Even for a prophet, the potential for error, for misinterpreting evidence, or misapplying the law was a heavy burden. It really emphasizes that judging isn't simply about delivering verdicts. It's about carefully considering complex human situations and striving for a truly just outcome, which, let's face it, is a daunting task for anyone.
It really makes you think about the immense pressure that judges must face even today, knowing that their decisions can have such life-altering consequences for individuals and entire communities.
Absolutely. And this hadith also encourages us to think about the importance of seeking out amicable solutions and trying our best to avoid unnecessary conflict. Perhaps the Prophet's preference to avoid judging was also a way of encouraging people to resolve their differences peacefully and avoid resorting to those formal legal proceedings whenever possible.
It's a good reminder that justice isn't always about punishment or retribution. It's also about reconciliation and finding ways to restore harmony within the community. Okay, so judging is clearly a serious matter, even for prophets. But what about those who are entrusted with this responsibility? What guidance does Volume 3 offer for judges who are striving to uphold justice?
Well, there's another hadith, Hadith 1326, that offers a really interesting insight into the reward system for judges. It states that a judge receives one reward for a mistaken ruling, but two rewards for a correct one that is reached through sincere effort.
So even getting it wrong isn't entirely bad, as long as you're genuinely putting in the effort to reach a just decision.
Precisely. It highlights that sincerity, diligence, and a commitment to seeking the truth are crucial qualities for a judge. The emphasis is on the process, on the striving to arrive at a just decision based on a careful consideration of the evidence and the law.
It acknowledges that judges, like all humans, are fallible. They can make mistakes. But the important thing is that they approach their task with humility, recognizing that potential for error, and constantly seeking to improve their understanding and application of the law.
This concept of continuous learning resonates even today. Judges and legal professionals are constantly updating their knowledge, attending seminars, reading new case law, all to ensure they are equipped to deliver the most informed and just rulings possible.
In this striving for fairness is reflected in another crucial hadith, Hadith 1331. This hadith emphasizes the need to hear both sides of a dispute before passing judgment. This might seem obvious to us now, but imagine a time when power dynamics often dictated outcomes, and the voices of the marginalized were easily silenced. This hadith introduces a radical concept, the idea that every party involved in a dispute has the right to be heard, to present their evidence, and to have their perspective considered regardless of their social standing or influence.
It's a cornerstone of modern legal systems, isn't it? This idea of due process and fair hearings, ensuring that everyone has an equal opportunity to present their case before an impartial judge.
Exactly. And it's fascinating to see how these principles articulated centuries ago continue to shape our understanding of justice and fairness today. This emphasis on impartiality is particularly striking.
Speaking of impartiality, there's another hadith that touches on this, Hadith 1433. It recounts a case where a man explicitly asks the Prophet to judge according to the Book of Allah, the Quran, emphasizing the importance of adherence to Islamic law even when family is involved. This case involved a sensitive issue, adultery, and the man wanted to ensure that justice was served even if it meant his own son faced punishment. This case highlights the paramount importance of upholding the law consistently and fairly, regardless of personal relationships or social pressure.
It's almost as if he's saying, look, I trust you, but I also trust the law, and I want you to apply it without any bias, even if it goes against me.
Absolutely. It demonstrates a deep respect for the rule of law. a belief that justice is best served when personal feelings and allegiances are set aside in favor of objective legal principles. And this commitment to due process is also evident in the way the Prophet handled the case. He carefully listened to both sides, clarified the appropriate punishment for each party, and even ensured that the woman confessed before carrying out the punishment.
This meticulous attention to detail, to ensuring that all the necessary legal requirements were met, speaks volumes about the emphasis on justice and fairness. It's not about rushing to judgment or seeking revenge. It's about following a clear legal process rooted in evidence and reason to arrive at a just outcome.
It's fascinating how these rulings, while rooted in a specific time and context, still resonate with our modern understanding of justice and fairness. Speaking of punishments, Volume 3 also tackles a rather sensitive topic, the hudud offenses. These are the most serious crimes in Islamic law, like theft, adultery, and false accusations. And their punishments are clearly defined in the Quran and Sunnah.
Now, you might be thinking that these punishments sound pretty harsh, especially by today's standards.
Yes, some of them were severe, but it's crucial to understand the historical context. Remember, this was a time when state-sponsored law enforcement was limited. These punishments, while harsh, were meant to act as deterrents, a way to protect society from the most harmful acts and maintain order in a world often characterized by tribal conflicts and limited central authority.
While deterrence is important, wouldn't some argue that rehabilitation and restorative justice are equally crucial, especially in cases involving less severe crimes?
That's a great point. And it's important to remember that even within these rulings, Islamic jurisprudence emphasizes justice and due process. Take Hadith 1439, for instance. It states that if someone passes away after receiving a hudud punishment, their punishment in this life serves as an atonement for their sin.
It's a profound concept. It suggests that even though these punishments were severe, they were also seen as a means of purification, allowing the individual to move forward, cleansed of their transgression.
It shifts the focus from solely retribution to a broader understanding of justice that encompasses both accountability and the potential for redemption.
And this concept of mercy is further emphasized in how these punishments are applied. Hadith 1428, for instance, encourages judges to seek any possible excuse to avoid implementing a hudud punishment.
So even though the Quran and Sunnah prescribe these punishments, there was still a preference for leniency and forgiveness.
Absolutely.
The Hadith highlights the Islamic principle of preferring forgiveness over punishment whenever possible. It encourages judges to look for mitigating circumstances, to consider the individual situation, and to err on the side of compassion, recognizing that everyone makes mistakes and deserves a chance for redemption.
This reminds me of the concept of repentance in Islamic tradition, the idea that sincere remorse and a commitment to change can erase past transgressions.
Exactly. And this emphasis on forgiveness and understanding is further highlighted in Hadith 1430, which stresses the importance of concealing the faults of fellow Muslims.
It's like saying, let's not rush to expose people's mistakes. Let's create a space for them to repent, make amends, and reintegrate into the community without the stigma of their past actions.
Precisely. It's about cultivating a culture of compassion and understanding, recognizing that everyone is capable of faltering, and that offering a path to redemption is often more beneficial than harsh punishment or public shaming.
This makes me think about how we approach justice and accountability in our own society. Perhaps we could learn a thing or two from these Islamic principles, focusing more on restorative justice rehabilitation and creating a more forgiving and understanding social environment.
I think that's one of the most valuable aspects of exploring these texts. They challenge us to critically examine our own values and assumptions and offer alternative perspectives that can enrich our understanding of justice, ethics, and compassion.
Now, so far, we've been focusing on judgments related to interpersonal disputes and criminal offenses. But Volume 3 also delves into rulings that govern other aspects of social and economic life, such as property rights and business transactions.
This is where things get really interesting for me. It's like peeking into the legal framework of a society guided by Islamic principles. So what kind of rulings do we find in this area?
Well, one fascinating concept is the idea of reviving barren land. Hadith 1379 in its commentary explain that if someone takes unused or unproductive land and makes it fertile again, think cultivating a deserted field, planting trees, or irrigating a dry area, they gain ownership of that land.
This concept of reviving barren land seems quite progressive for its time. What were some of the societal implications of this ruling?
It's a great question. You see, this ruling wasn't just about claiming ownership. It was about encouraging people to invest in the land to improve it and ultimately contribute to the well-being of the community. By incentivizing land development, it promoted economic growth, increased food production, and transformed unproductive areas into valuable resources for the benefit of society as a whole.
It recognized that land shouldn't just sit idle. It should be used productively, and those who put in the effort to make it fruitful deserve to benefit from their labor. This concept also ties into a broader theme of responsible land management, which is also addressed in this volume.
For example, Hadith 1383 describes how the Prophet made a deal with the people of Khaybar, agreeing to share half of the produce from the land, whether fruits or crops.
This wasn't just a random agreement, it was a carefully considered arrangement to ensure both the community and those working the land benefited.
So it was a model of shared prosperity, recognizing both ownership rights and the importance of fair compensation for labor.
Exactly. It's a remarkable example of how Islamic teachings promote a balance between individual initiative and collective well-being, ensuring that economic activity benefits both those who own the resources and those who work to cultivate them.
This principle of shared prosperity also extends to other areas of economic life, such as business transactions. And this is where Islamic teachings offer some fascinating insights that are incredibly relevant even today.
Okay, I'm all ears. What kind of rulings are we talking about here?
Well, there's a strong emphasis on honesty, transparency, and fairness in all business dealings. You might recall the hadith we discussed earlier about the 3 types of people Allah won't look at on the Day of Judgment, one of whom is the one who promotes his merchandise with a false oath. This hadith, along with others in this volume, establishes a clear foundation for ethical business conduct.
It's not just about avoiding outright lies. It's about refraining from any deceptive practices that could mislead the buyer, even if you're technically telling the truth.
You'll notice a strong emphasis on the concept of gharar, which refers to transactions that involve excessive uncertainty or deceptive tricks. This concept is explored in detail in the commentary under Hadith 1227. It provides specific examples of forbidden transactions such as selling an unborn animal fish still in the water or a runaway slave.
These are all situations where the buyer can't be certain of what they're actually getting, and the potential for exploitation and unfair outcomes is high.
I can see how this concept is incredibly relevant in today's marketplace. Think about online shopping, where product descriptions can be misleading, reviews can be fake, and buyers often have limited information about the quality or authenticity of the goods they're purchasing.
That's a great point. The principles outlined in these rulings, while formulated centuries ago, offer a timeless framework for ethical conduct in a rapidly evolving economic landscape. It's about protecting both the buyer and the seller from unfair outcomes, which ultimately fosters trust and stability in the marketplace.
And this concern for fairness and transparency also comes up when dealing with muhaqala and muzabana. These are specific types of transactions that deal with selling crops or dates before they're fully measurable. Hadith 1224 in its commentary delve into the different opinions on whether these practices are permissible.
So why the debate? It seems like it would be difficult to determine a fair price if you don't know the exact quantity of what you're buying or selling.
That's the crux of the issue. The underlying principle here is to prevent disputes and ensure fairness for both parties involved. Some scholars argue that if both the buyer and seller are experienced and knowledgeable, and the price is based on a reasonable estimate, then these transactions might be acceptable. Others maintain that it's simply too risky and opens the door for exploitation, as one party could easily take advantage of the uncertainty surrounding the quantity.
It's fascinating how these rulings grapple with the complexities of economic activity and strive to establish guidelines that balance the need for flexibility with the imperative of fairness and preventing exploitation.
Speaking of fairness, there's another ruling that caught my attention. It's Hadith 1247, which discusses the option for both the buyer and seller to cancel a sale as long as they haven't physically separated.
So it's like a built-in cooling-off period, allowing both parties to reconsider their decision and back out of the deal if they have second thoughts.
Exactly. This ruling emphasizes the importance of mutual consent and avoiding any pressure tactics in business transactions. It recognizes that people might make impulsive decisions, or they might not have all the necessary information at the time of the sale. This cooling-off period provides a safety net, ensuring that both parties enter into the transaction willingly and without feeling coerced.
It's remarkable how these rulings prioritize fairness and protect the vulnerable, even in seemingly straightforward transactions.
This commitment to protecting the vulnerable is especially evident in rulings related to preemption, the right of first refusal when someone is selling a property.
Right, I've heard of that. Like if you're selling your house, your neighbor gets the first chance to buy it.
Exactly. Hadith 1361 and its commentary delve into the nuances of this rainis. exploring different opinions on who has the strongest claim to preemption.
So even within Islamic jurisprudence, there's room for debate and interpretation.
Absolutely. These rulings aren't meant to be rigid or absolute. They provide a framework for interpretation and application, considering the unique circumstances of each case.
In this case, some scholars argue that the neighbor has the strongest claim, as they are most directly affected by the sale of the adjacent property. Others believe it's the partner who owns a share of the property, as their existing stake gives them a vested interest in maintaining ownership.
It highlights the complexity of property rights and the need for a balanced approach that considers both individual interests and the potential impact on the wider community.
Now let's shift gears a bit and explore a topic that might seem a bit unexpected: rulings related to animals and their interactions with people.
Okay, this sounds intriguing. Going from property disputes to what? Animal lawsuits?
Not quite lawsuits, but definitely cases where animals cause harm or damage. Hadith 1349, for example, deals with injuries caused by animals.
So like if your neighbor's camel accidentally steps on your prize-winning tulips.
More along the lines of a camel kicking someone or a horse trampling a field, the Hadith states that the injuries caused by animals are without liability.
Wait, so the owner isn't responsible for the damage their animal causes?
It's not that simple. The commentary clarifies that this ruling applies specifically to situations where an animal has wandered away from its owner and caused harm unintentionally. It's about distinguishing between negligence on the owner's part and unavoidable accidents.
So if your camel escapes its enclosure because you didn't secure the gate properly, you'd still be liable for any damage it causes.
Most likely, yes. The emphasis is on the owner's responsibility to take reasonable precautions to prevent harm.
That seems fair. It encourages responsible animal ownership and ensures that those who suffer harm are not left without recourse.
And this principle extends to other situations as well. Hadith 1348, for instance, discusses the case of a stray sheep. The Prophet advises someone who finds it to take it in, as it's either for them, their brother, or the wolf.
It's a compassionate approach, recognizing that even animals deserve protection and care.
Precisely. It highlights the interconnectedness of all beings and the responsibility we have to care for those who are lost or vulnerable.
But what's interesting is how the Prophet reacts when asked about a stray camel. How does that differ? Are camels seen as more dangerous or less deserving of protection?
It's not about danger or desertingness. The Hadith emphasizes that camels, unlike sheep, have the ability to find their own way back. The Prophet even expresses frustration when someone asks about a stray camel, stating that it has its feet and its water reserve to guide it home.
So the message is, don't worry about the camel, it can handle itself.
It's more about recognizing the camel's natural capabilities and trusting its instincts. It's a reminder that not every situation requires human intervention. Sometimes the best course of action is to observe, respect, and allow nature to take its course.
This reminds me of the concept of fitra, the innate disposition towards goodness and balance that exists in all of creation.
That's a beautiful connection. It highlights the importance of recognizing the inherent wisdom and capabilities of all creatures and not interfering unnecessarily.
So from business ethics to property rights to our interactions with animals, these rulings offer a holistic perspective on living in harmony with ourselves, each other, and the natural world.
Exactly. And what's remarkable is how these principles, rooted in centuries-old traditions, still resonate with our modern understanding of ethical conduct. They offer timeless guidance as we navigate the complexities of modern life.
As we conclude our deep dive into Sunan al Tirmidhi, Volume 3, what key takeaways would you like our listeners to ponder?
Well, I think the most important takeaway is the profound emphasis on justice, fairness, and compassion that permeates these rulings. Whether it's resolving disputes, conducting business, or interacting with animals, Islamic teachings encourage us to approach all aspects of life with a commitment to ethical conduct.
These rulings are not just about adhering to a set of rules. They're about cultivating a mindset, a way of being in the world that prioritizes balance, harmony, and the well-being of all creation.
So as you go about your day, think about how these principles might apply to your own choices and actions. How can you promote fairness in your dealings with others? How can you show compassion to those who are struggling or have made mistakes?
These are questions worth pondering, and perhaps the teachings we've explored today can offer some guidance on the path to a more just, ethical, and compassionate world. Thank you for joining us on this fascinating exploration of Islamic legal rulings and judgments in Sunan al Tirmidhi, Volume 3. Until next time, may peace be with you.